Welcome to Concussion Fix Minisodes. These bite-sized clips are taken directly from our full podcast episodes to give you direct answers to your specific questions about persistent concussion symptoms and recovery. Short, clear, and packed with value. Now remember that these clips are not medical advice and you should always speak with your healthcare provider before attempting anything you hear on this channel. Let's go.
Some of it was talked about earlier, but it has to do with 70, 120 Gs of acceleration. How to get that's how much force you have to get a concussion. Like, how much of a difference does it make if you embrace for the punch or the hit or whatever? And if you don't embrace for it, doesn't take less G force if you don't see it coming, or is it just the same?
It's the same.
Yeah.
But your chances of suffering that amount of force goes down, right? So if you think about the G forces is like the brain moving inside the skull, right? So if you're bracing for it, you'd have to get hit harder in order to cause that amount of G force.
Oh, okay.
But if you're not bracing for it, a smaller hit could cause that amount of G force. So the G force is the same, because you need the brain to move within the skull and have that acceleration.
Gotcha.
A perfect example of this is a study that was done on cats. And this was done in like the 40s. And basically what they did is they had two groups, and in one of the groups they stabilized the neck so that no movement was allowed at all. And if there was no movement allowed at all, the exact quote in the article, which is kind of funny, is that concussion could not be attained even with the largest velocity possible with the pendulum. So I just picture these researchers just trying to swing this pendulum down to hit this cat in the head to try and cause a concussion injury.
Oh my gosh.
I know, brutal, right?
Yeah.
I'm just imagining that. I don't know if that's actually what happened, but like even with the maximum velocity obtainable by the pendulum, concussion could not be achieved. It's because when the neck isn't allowed to move, you hit the head. If there's no movement of the head, there's no acceleration. With no acceleration, you can't cause a concussion. So it doesn't matter how hard you get hit. It matters how much the head moves and how fast it moves. So if you are, in a boxing match or something like that, and you're bracing and you're able to really stabilize, you could take a really hard punch and have very little acceleration of the head and brain. So that is protective. But it doesn't really matter even if you're stabilizing, because the G forces required for the concussion injury are the same. So if you think about this in terms of like moment arms, if your neck was a complete rigid, stiff object, in order to move your head, you'd have to move the whole body. Right? So if your head and neck were coupled and this was a rigid structure, in order to cause a concussion, you'd have to really hit the head hard in order to move the entire body fast enough to cause the brain to accelerate and decelerate at that particular rate. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It would just be difficult. Another study done on NFL players looking at video review found that it was what they call like a finite element model. So what they'll do is they'll look at these things and they'll try to play with different variables. So they tried increasing helmet padding, increasing helmet stiffness, or increasing helmet rigidity, all these different things. Nothing reduced head acceleration values as much as if they increased the stiffness value of the neck. So if you increase the stiffness of the neck, you reduce the amount of head acceleration, because now the body and everything is coupled. So the moment arm is so big that it takes a lot of force to move it quick enough to cause a concussion injury. So the number one way to reduce concussion risk is neck stiffness. But most concussions happen when people are unaware that they're about to get hit in the head, right? Like if you think
Exactly.
you're a hockey player, you're looking over your shoulder, you catch the pass, boom, you get hit before you can even engage your neck. So when you look at studies that look at neck strengthening and concussion risk, it doesn't work. Because in order to have a stiff neck, because neck stiffness and neck strength are two different things, in order to have a stiff neck, you have to have a strong neck that's actively contracted prior to the impact. Because it takes the peak linear acceleration happens at between 6 and 20 milliseconds. That's when you hit your peak head acceleration. But it takes you 90 milliseconds to even start to engage and contract your neck muscles. So even by the time, like 6 to 20 milliseconds, people are like, well, if I just have a really strong neck, then it won't happen. Well, no, because if you're playing a sport, you're looking around, you're moving around, and if you're not actively contracting your neck, it's not stiff. And if you think you're going to be able to stiffen it before the acceleration peaks, you're not, because 6 to 20 milliseconds is the peak acceleration. It takes you 90 milliseconds to even start the contraction of your neck, and it takes you another 150 milliseconds to even get to half of your contractile strength. If you want to get to full strength, it's going to take you another 150 milliseconds to get to full strength. So you're talking now about you need half a second of time in order to fully engage your neck. Now, if you're an athlete and you have half a second, you're likely going to just jump out of the way rather than engage and get low. But if you're in a sport like a combat sport where you're able to, like, you're looking at, you can engage more because everything is in front of you, right? Whereas a sport where you have to turn and look, soccer, football, rugby, whatever, you're having to turn and you're not going to see, when you're turned this way, you're not going to see that guy coming. And so that's why it doesn't really matter if you're engaged or not. The amount of acceleration at the head is still the same. But if you are engaged and contracted, it's going to take more force to cause that level of acceleration.
Does it take a difference if you think the punch or the hit is coming from the left side, but it's coming from the right side and you brace for the right side? Or is it like the same if you don't like stiffen up for the left side, and if you just stay relaxed and it comes from the right side, if you get what I mean?
I don't think it really, it doesn't matter. If your
Doesn't
neck,
matter.
if your neck is stiffer, it takes more force to cause that level of acceleration. If your neck is not stiff, it's going to take less force to cause the same level of acceleration. So if you think it's coming from the right and you engage right and you're correct, that's going to be better for you than if you think it's coming right and you engage right and it comes left. You're not going to have that same level of stiffness, which means more likely to occur.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to this Concussion Fix Minisode. If you want to learn more about the causes of persistent concussion symptoms and how to fix them, join one of our upcoming free 90-minute patient webinars. Details and sign-up links are in the description. You'll see that with the right approach, recovery is possible. See you there.